Okay, we're recording. Okay, so this is episode number 16, I think, for Paddle the World. We started off to be like a 3 or 4 episode thing to connect with campers. So thanks for being with us today. We've got 2 presenters today. Mondrell, who is our old reliable, our standby, is going to be with us this morning. He's got an interesting piece that he and I talked about in terms of practices and creating teams. Our anchor today, a new guest, is Bob Zavarel. And Bob is the president, owner, creator, founder of Zre. You've probably seen those paddles. A bunch of us have them. Zre is Zavarel Racing Equipment. And Bob started this in his garage when he was a kid in the 70s. And anyway, I'm going to talk to I'll give you more of an introduction on Bob after Mike Mondrell does his. And I'm going to mute everybody because Stan's stumbling around there trying to get on there. So I'm going to mute you, and then we'll have questions at the end, okay? Stan Mahachak, good to hear you. If you can hear me, mute yourself.
What we reported earlier, that the closure to non-essential travel will continue until September 21st. Blair says the government will continue to do what's necessary to keep our communities safe. The border has been closed since March to non-essential travel like tourism and shopping to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Essential travel, such as business and the movement of goods across the border, will continue to make sure.
Okay. So everybody's muted. Mondrell, can you unmute yourself?
Okay, I'm
Perfect.
unmuted.
Okay, so leave yourselves muted if you don't mind, guys, because we really pick up that background noise. So those of you that don't know Mondrell, and I think that just might be Bob and Stan out there, I met Mondrell, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago when I came down to Florida. He was one of the athletes on our crew, and a Team USA athlete, multi-gold medalist. And he coaches a competitive crew in Wisconsin. He's in Florida in the wintertime. He's in Wisconsin in the summertime. And he coaches a competitive women's crew up there, really good crew that qualified to go to France. But unfortunately, we know what happened to France. So he's up there right now. And Mike's a great coach. And he's come a long way as a paddler and an athlete in the time that I've known him. And so I asked him if he'd be interested in doing a piece on sort of the coaching, the practice, practicing, and a little bit about working with teams. So Mondrell, can I turn that over to you now?
Yeah.
And if you want to put him on speaker view, you'll get his full, great big head right on your screen.
Okay, everybody got me? Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. So the piece I'm going to do today is, so I'm normally on here for like the Mondrell moment, which is sort of just a little comical ending. Today's kind of more of I'm going to start my timer. Today's more of a serious piece. I'll try to keep it serious. So we had talked about maybe me talking about the process of our senior C team, the national team that went to Thailand and did so well. So I'm gonna kind of just start from the beginning of that and sort of take you through that process. So we basically started out probably a year in advance. Pat and the coaches, the coaching staff, kind of went around the whole country and looked for athletes to make up this amazing team. So I believe the first thing was probably a camp in California. We had several camps. We had 2 camps in Tampa. We had train and race camp in Ottawa. We had a train and race camp in Long Beach. I just gonna start at the beginning. This team was a bit of a different team because most of the people on this team were newer paddlers. They didn't have a lot of dragon boat experience. Some had some OC experience. Not a lot of people on that team had any had ever been to a World Nations. So this was going to be their first international competition. The team was sort of hand selected, and the people that were picked for the team were actually great athletes. So probably the best paddlers on their club teams, strong, fit people. We started out with like fitness testing, and fitness testing was kind of unique on this team because everyone kind of thought that probably they were the top dog, or they were the fittest guy on the team, guy or girl on the team. And when they we started turning in results, you could see everyone else's results, and you came to kind of quickly realize that everyone on the team was fit. So there was no like 2 or 3 athletes that were much fitter than the rest of the team. Everybody was pretty much, you know, in that group together. Just not much separation. So great athletes. So then what happens next is that when you have to turn in the next test, you're going to make sure that you're on your game, or you continue to train, because in the beginning you're individual athletes, you're fighting for a place on the team. You want to be that guy that's up there in the fitness testing. So it kind of pushed everyone. It pushed everyone. We had not even been together yet, and it pushed everyone to train harder. So even very fit people were doing things they had normally not ever done. I was fitness testing. I was probably middle of the pack somewhere. But even for me, it was sort of a wake-up call. I knew that when I turned in the next set of scores, they had to be better than the scores I turned in the previous time. So it kind of pushed everyone. Then when we finally met up as a team, we had a lot of different paddling styles. So everybody's coming from different teams, different clubs. Everybody does things a bit different. Everyone had to buy into the stroke that our coaching staff was teaching. So there was a lot of adjustments to be made. People we had were character people. They were people that were team players. They were people with a lot of heart. So it took a while, but everybody sort of bought into the system, and a lot of the early training was technique, just beating technique into us, and so that we were all on the same page. We were all paddling the same way, the same style. Pretty soon, these individuals became a team. We didn't have anybody that was like felt they were better than the rest of us. So this goes from the people that were starting athletes on the race crews, down to the people that didn't get much racing in, but were also a big part of the team. There was not much complaining that I knew of. Maybe the coaches heard some complaining, but I didn't hear anything. So we had pretty soon these individual athletes, we all became a team. The timing of our training to go to Thailand was probably one of the biggest factors as to why I believe we did so well. The timing of the camps and the racing leading up to going to Thailand was what it did was it got us to peak at just the right time. we did Ottawa, we did Long Beach. Those were races and camps. We raced well, but we learned a lot. We learned, you know, that we have to paddle as a team, as a group, and we did that. We learned a lot though along the way. I only had been to one World Nations, but I was actually, I would consider myself a veteran on the team because no one had any, not a lot of people had any experience going to a World Championship. I remember a practice in Long Beach where it was an open team practice, and one of the guys on the team was getting pretty beat up by the coaches. We got off the boat and I pulled him off to the side and I said, you know, you just have to relax. Don't tense up when you're out there, when they're hollering at you. Just, you know, relax and listen. Just focus and listen. And I said, you're going to be fine. Go back out there this next practice and you're going to be fine. So we go out for the next practice, and he didn't get called out at all. He did well, but I got called out several times. So what could have happened is that when that boat came in, he could have came over to me and said, what the heck are you, you know, why are you giving me advice? You just got called out yourself. But he didn't. He came over to me and he said, thank you. He says, you know, I want to thank you. He says, I had a much better practice. I listened to what you said. I relaxed. I listened to what they said. So little things like that. I mean, that's really good stuff. That goes a long way. We did, like I said, we did well racing, but we always knew that there was more. We never felt like we plateaued before we got to Thailand. We always felt we could do more, and we always wanted to do more. We pushed each other. We supported each other. So we go to Thailand, and there's a certain look about athletes that are peaking. It's sort of, you look at them, you can see the fitness in their bodies, but you can see there's a certain look in their eyes. I could see that in everyone on the team when we got to Thailand. I knew something special was about to happen. The odds were against us. We had not won Senior C, a Team USA Senior C team had never won a gold medal. We had this inexperienced crew. So on paper, if you'd look at this, you would say that this would be more of a 2-year program. We would go to Thailand and maybe get some experience, and then 2 years later come back and we would do really well. But that's, like I said, that's on paper, and that's not what happened. What happened was we got there and the training, everybody bought into the system, the training, the technique. And when we got there, we all seemed to be peaking at the same time. I remember we went out for a mixed team practice, and I've been paddling for 11 years, and it is the single greatest practice I have ever been a part of. It was just an amazing practice. It was a perfect practice. And when we got off the boat, some of the people that got off the boat had chills. Some of the people had tears in their eyes. There wasn't a lot of talking. There was a lot of eye contact, and there was just this feeling that we knew that something great was going to happen. We had all just peaked, and like I said, this was just the greatest practice I've ever been involved with. And I would say that if you asked anyone that was on that boat, they would tell you the same thing. The next day we actually had another practice, and our coach canceled the practice because he realized we had done so well, and let's just end it on this positive note before we go into competition. The first day of racing was the 2K. So the first team that raced was that mixed team in the 2K, and we won the gold medal. So it was the first gold medal that a Team USA Senior C team had ever won. Everyone was excited, everyone was happy, but it wasn't the type of celebration like you would think. It wasn't like we won the Stanley Cup or anything. It was we were happy, but we also knew that we had a lot of racing ahead of us and we weren't done. We weren't satisfied. So we focused, and the coaches also helped us with this, to focus, let that go. You won a gold medal, let that go. That's behind us now. Let's go, let's look forward. Let's go get the next one. And that's what ended up happening. We started winning gold medal after gold medal. And we would just let it go and we would focus on the next event. Another thing, I just have a lot of memories, a lot of really good memories. One of the memories I have is that at our team tent, our team camp for the entire event, the other Team USA teams were sitting around us, the other age groups, and I noticed that our camp was much quieter, much more relaxed. This isn't a knock on the other teams, but I could look over and I could see them, goofing around, and they were a little bit louder. We were very quiet, very focused. Everybody knew we were there and for a reason, and that we had a job to do, and just extreme focus. I've never seen a team camp as quiet as that team camp was. Just amazing focus. So we went on to just win gold medal after gold medal. We ended up winning 11 of 12 possible gold medals. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that has to be one of the best, if not the best performance ever by a Team USA team. What else? I wrote down a few little notes here. Let me check. When I went up on the podium to receive the first gold medal, I had some tears of happiness, and then I had no tears until the last time I went up on the podium, which was the 8th gold medal that I won. I had tears again for that 8th gold medal, and those were more like tears of sadness, because I didn't want it to end. I wanted to come back again the next day and race some more. I mean, that's how good it was. I wasn't satisfied with the 8 gold medals. I wanted more. So those were tears of sadness because it was over, and I hated to see it end because this was such a great group of people, and we all got along so well. But again, I think my greatest memory is still that perfect practice. That sort of set us up for everything we were able to accomplish. So when I think back on it now, as silly as this sounds, that practice actually means more to me than those 8 gold medals, because it was just this incredible practice, and I've never felt a boat glide or move like that before, not even in a race situation. And it was exactly what we needed going into the competition. And that's like my greatest memory of going to Thailand and doing so well, is that perfect practice. I'm almost at 15 minutes, so I'm doing pretty good here. I did prepare something on my motivational board here, and let me get that. Did you all see that? Okay, it says, practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And that's by the legendary football coach, Vince Lombardi. And so that's how I'm going to end my segment here. If anybody has any questions, I love to talk about this team. So go ahead, fire away. I'm ready. Nothing, huh?
You know what, Mike, I'm sure there's questions that are going to come. That was, thanks for bringing back the memories. That was something else.
Do you have anything to add, Pat?
No, I don't. I do, but we'd be here all day.
Okay.
I think you described it really well. It was a pretty emotional experience, and I would like to hear maybe a little more about your. Did you have any contact with any athletes that were a little worried about making the teams? at the tryouts. Any contact with any athletes that were really doubting themselves, that wondered if they were going to get there, and if you ever witnessed any of the veterans sort of, supporting them, helping them along.
I lost your audio. What was the last part?
I just wondered if you noticed any that we leaned on veterans like you to support the rookies that were coming along. Did you have an experience like that with a rookie, or did you witness anybody, showing some leadership to some of these guys? Some of these rookies needed actually to be settled down. We had some pretty big personalities that were rookies that sort of needed to be, I don't want to say put in their place, but needed a little perspective adjustment. Did you ever run across, have an experience dealing with a rookie, settling them down?
Well, the one thing I kind of talked about was the one guy I talked to after a practice. It's kind of funny because I never expected myself to fill that role as being the veteran type of guy that would settle people down, and I just found myself in that position. I'm usually more of a lead by example type of guy, and as much as I talk on Zoom and that kind of stuff, I'm a pretty quiet guy when I'm on the boat. Kind of all business on the boat. There were individual athletes that I did talk to. You just have to try to get across the point that, it's a team. You're not here as an individual. You're here to support the team, support each other, and to sort of, that's something that people need to learn. And the sooner you learn that, the better off you are. There were some people actually that didn't even make the team. I remember talking to them, and perhaps they didn't listen. I don't know, but yeah, that was a different sort of a role for me. And but I found myself in that position, and I just went with it. Whatever I could do to help out. Yeah, that's about it on that.
What about the comment? I remember you coming into we were having a debrief. I don't know if it was after the 2000 or 1000, and you came in and asked everybody to be quiet because you had something to say, and you had overheard something from the Canadian team.
Oh yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah. So I overheard one of the Canadians. It was a woman, and she said it was on the mixed team, and she said, well, it was after it was one of the first few races. Well, we'll get you guys next time in Hong Kong. So we were in their heads. When you hear stuff like that, they're defeated. They're defeated. So I had to share that with everyone, just to let them know that we were in their heads, and that's a pretty cool feeling because, like 2 years prior, I think they were in our heads. So now things had changed, and we were in their heads, and they were. That's a give up. I give up attitude. I surrender, and that's stuff you feed off of. That's motivation. Let's bury them. You know what I mean? We got them down. Let's bury them.
Yeah. I remember that. That was a goosebump sort of presentation that you did there. That you spoke to us. Any other questions for Mike?
I got a question.
Eddie.
Yeah, this is more for you, but first of all, congratulations to that team. I mean, that was just historic, and I know a lot of those great team members are tuned in today. So that was fantastic to be watching at home and seeing all those gold medals just line up. But Pat, my question is for you. I assume you were part of that practice that he just described, where everybody had tears and goosebumps coming off the boat. Can you give us kind of your perspective?
Yeah.
I was afraid you're going to ask me that because I'm not even sure I can remember it. I had so much going on that day. But I do remember, I do remember going out. I remember a little bit about the practice plan. And I didn't have the same gushy feeling that Mondrell had, because while things were going really well on the boat, Canada was on the water at the same time. And I was a little bit distracted as I would checking them out a little bit. I didn't have anything to change in our boat. Our boat was ticking along, as Mike said. It felt good. It felt smooth. But it's kind of like practicing when we practice with our club crews on Lake Meona, and we'll have this, gee, that boat felt great. Then we'll go to a race and we'll say, well, geez, it appears that the other teams were having some good practices too, because they're ahead of us. So we've got nothing to measure against. So I think a lot of things came into play there. I think we peaked at the right time. I think the athletes were ready. We had the right personalities, the right characters, and it all blended. And guys like Mondrell, that had that experience competing against Team Canada and coming out behind, had a bit of a, I don't want to say a calming influence, but just made sure people knew we were in for we've had some great practices, but we haven't won anything yet. And the competition is formidable. We don't know what to expect. So, I mean, I'll tell you right now, I was confident, but I used to coach that Canadian program, and I knew they weren't going to roll over, and I didn't expect them to. So I was guardedly optimistic, but afraid, scared to death to verbalize it and say it to anybody. Any other questions, Liz?
Yeah, can we get Liz to talk about that practice? Because I think she was one of the ones that had tears in her eyes.
All right, well, Liz, you got a couple of minutes.
I don't have a question, but it's one of those things that if you're lucky enough to experience that kind of feeling in a boat, because it doesn't happen for everybody, but it's a magical moment, and it's almost like an out-of-body experience. And it's a defining moment for the team, because there's this whole collective energy that everybody in the boat can feel, and the words just can't express what it is. It's just all of a sudden you know that, all right, this is it, we're a team. We've all just felt that same feeling. It may be expressed differently for everybody. You could be having tears or shivers or chills but it's a magical moment, and yeah, it's one of those things you never forget. It's pretty darn cool.
Everybody reacted differently, like tears, shivers. We had one guy that just kept running to the bathroom. Anyway, thanks for the memories, Mondrell. That was a nice trip, and I hope it didn't bore anybody. For those of you that were with us, and for those of you that weren't, I really hope you get the opportunity. And I gotta say, looking at Randy, I'm sorry, but Randy, you are dead center on my screen. I just can't get away from your image. Randy made the team, and 2 weeks before we left, had a medical issue and was told that he wasn't allowed to fly. And so wasn't able to make the trip with us. So he was with us in every race. We had his ID tag in the boat with us, and I know he's keeping in shape, and looking forward to him getting a crack at the next one, right, Randy? All right. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Bob, and Bob is, as I mentioned, is the founder of Zre Paddles, or it's called Zavarel Racing Equipment. They make flat water paddles for all sorts of different flat water sports, including dragon boat. And he started off when he was a kid in the 70s, making them in his garage. And who knew it would turn out to be his lifelong business. I think he is, and he'll clarify this, might be the only USA-made paddle, a competitive paddle that's used all over the world. He's a professional, or was, I don't know if he still is, he can share that with us, professional long-distance canoe paddler himself. He really knows the ins and outs of connection to the water, the design of the blade, how the blade dances with the water, how it connects, and that whole thing. So without further ado, I'm going to get Bob on here, and if you guys can mute yourselves again. And Bob, can you unmute yourself, Bob? Never mind, I'll do it.
Okay.
Are you there?
Yep.
All right, everybody, this is Bob Zavarel, And Bob, where exactly are you located?
Our factory's located in Wells Bridge, New York. It's probably 100 miles southwest of Albany. I'm sure everybody knows where Albany is. Oneonta, New York. It's about 20 miles west of Oneonta.
Okay. So how did you
30
get started?
miles east of Binghamton.
Okay.
30 miles east of Binghamton. That might, kind of pinpoint us a little more.
Perfect. And you're right on. You got some nice rivers, some nice paddling up there. How'd you get started in making paddles? What occurred to you in the 70s when you were, you must have been 5 years old in the 70s.
Yeah, not quite that young, but a friend of mine, I guess on how it all got started was a friend of mine asked me to do the 70-mile canoe race, which is the General Clinton Canoe Regatta here. And I was, I believe, 17 years old, junior in high school. And of course, I never been in a canoe before other than going fishing with my dad a few times. So I got, in the boat with his gentleman's name was Dick Davies. And we practiced, back then it was probably a lot of practice. We had 55 hours in. Now people have like unlimited hours. But we got in the 70-mile race and we ended up winning it. And that kind of really intrigued me to keep paddling. So at the same time, back then, all we had was wooden paddles. So the following year, I paddled with a wet and pro class with a fellow named Al Camp. He was, he had his own paddle business, and we were using his paddles, which were wood. And they were, for back then, they were great paddles. I'm sure Stan, well aware, probably even used some of those paddles. And one day I was using them, and back then they were also straight. And I had I just thinking in my head that, geez, I could make one better than that. So I made a wooden paddle, and it was, felt pretty good. I don't know if it was any better, but I thought it was. And then a couple years later, in 1973, we're up at Canada. It's called Classique. It's one of the Triple Crown Pro races that we do in 3 and 27 pro boats. And probably a lot of people heard of Gene Jensen. He was one of the top racers back then. And he shows up with a bent shaft paddle. Nobody's ever seen him before. Of course, he was the inventor of the bent shaft. So actually, he ended up winning that race, beating the top team, Claude and Serge Corbin. And he ended up beating them. So we came back home, and I right away made a bent shaft paddle, tried it. Oh man, what a difference. And I couldn't get my partner Al to use one. And, one day he says, give me that thing. So he tries it. And then next thing I know, he was making them. And, but if anybody knows Al, he's pretty stubborn. So it took him, a couple weeks before it set in, and he actually used it. But they are quite an advantage over a straight paddle. Like I know in the dragon boat world, that's all you have is straight paddles. Years ago, I submitted to the IBF a bent shaft dragon boat paddle, but they didn't. I guess they want to keep it more traditional. And I think it would help the speed of the boat. And, it'd probably end up in the same situation. Everybody'd have them, so you're right back to square one. But people that didn't have a bent shaft probably wouldn't have the speed that the people with bent shaft paddles.
Bob, can you tell us a little bit about, we've gone from wooden paddles to carbon fiber. Can you talk to us a little bit about the strength of the technology making the carbon fiber paddles and the lightness versus strength and endurance and durability of the paddles?
Yeah, well, between wood and carbon's the difference between night and day. I mean, when I first started making carbon paddles, I figured, well, I'll save my carbon paddle for the races, just keep it in nice shape and everything. And I'll train with my wood paddle. I grabbed my wood paddle, and I just couldn't use it anymore. It threw your stroke rate, your technique, everything comes into play. When you switch to a lightweight carbon paddle, it actually cleans up your technique. If you don't have great technique, which I didn't have perfect technique, but when I started using a lightweight carbon paddle, all of a sudden I was doing everything better, not only going faster and easier, but all of a sudden my technique was cleaned up, and it really worked quite well. We decided to stick with a 12-degree bent shaft paddles, mostly because the 12-degree balances your top and bottom arm equally. Now, if you go 14 degrees or over 12, it kind of favors your bottom arm and not your top arm, and you find yourself leaning forward with a bigger bent paddle. And it's just reversed with a straighter paddle. You know, you're getting more on your top arm than your bottom arm, but 12 degrees is like the sweet spot. It just like perfectly, you know, both of your arms are perfectly pulling together. You could feel it when you use it, as your bottom arm and your top arm are pulling equally together. So the 12-degree is by far, in my opinion, the best, and we tested that extensively. We tested the heck out of all the degrees, and always came back to the 12-degree was the best. And going back to the wood paddles, it all started, you know, with the wood paddle, and then we were making wood paddles with foam blades, wood paddles with foam and carbon blades, and then we threw a carbon shaft on there and carbon grip, and then, you know, it took a little time to figure everything out, but we ended up with a 100% you know, the shaft and the grip was hollow. The blade was a German-made foam core, extremely lightweight and very strong. So we ended up with a super lightweight carbon fiber canoe paddle.
We talked a little bit about the grips, the grips on the paddles, the palm grip, the T grip. And I thought it was really interesting when you talked about the purpose of the palm grip and what that does to your technique and to your wrist. Do you mind telling us about that? And we're talking about the dragon boat paddles.
Yes, the main thing is getting a grip that's not too small. You want it to fill your hand so it distributes the pressure of the, you know, when you're paddling hard, you have a lot of pressure on your grip. And if you have a small grip, it's gonna put more pressure in the palm of your hand than, say, a grip that fits your hand fuller. So I know a lot of people say that's, you know, the mistake everybody makes is going to too small a grip. But, you know, the dragon boat races are short and sweet. They're not like some of the races we do, you know, 8, 10, 15 hours nonstop, marathon races. So, you know, we got to have everything just perfect. But in the dragon boat world, I don't think it's real critical, but it's still something to think about. And we have a T grip available that's pretty nice. A carbon fiber T grip on our dragon boat paddles. We have a palm grip, and we also have a smaller women's palm grip. We don't have it on our website yet, but we do have it available, so anybody watching could request one, and, you know, we could set them up with a smaller grip. What it is, it's like our grip we have now, our standard grip that we've had for years, our traditional grip, and we just thinned it out and made it thinner and a little bit smaller, and it's actually very comfortable. And then we have another grip. It curves forward a little bit. It's smaller, but it fills your palm up pretty good. We haven't really even put a name on it. We just call them curved small grips for now, but eventually we'll have those available on the website. But people that do want them can get them if they ask for them. So everybody here, you know, knows about it. So if they want to try one or need a picture of one, or I'm sure there'll be a few around for people to see. You know, you just, when you order a paddle, you just ask for the grip type and so on.
I've heard people say, and I think Liz mentioned to you the other day, we were talking about grips, and she said, I don't want one of those big grips that feels like I'm holding onto a baseball.
Yeah.
And And then you explained, when you explained the purpose of it, is that if this is the grip, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's a big palm grip, this one, then you've got you can't just paddle like this. You've got to have your palm over it. You can't just have your fingers on it. And as soon as I move my palm up under, look what happens to my wrist. But if I've got a T grip, it's really easy for me to just hold it with my fingers and drive down this way. See where my elbow is now. But if I've got a palm grip, I think you said you get your body with a palm grip, it's more conducive to getting your body over the paddle.
Yes, the palm grip, our standard palm grip's a little bit fuller, and for women, it's probably on the large size for most women. But you're right on your wrist position. You know, if you have it too full, it's gonna straighten your wrist out, and if it's smaller, it's gonna be in a better position. But that's another thing, you know, you can look at. But the T grip is substantially smaller than our palm grip. So people that, you know, feel the palm grip's a little bit too big can go to the T grip, which is, you know, it's not like a barrel T. It's not like a round dowel on a canoe shaft. It's a molded, conformed T grip. It has, you know, finger recess in the front, and it's curved in the back. It fits in your palm of your hand, but it is smaller, and you know, you have the control you want for dragon boating. So the T grip is very popular, mostly in the dragon boat world.
So the first wood paddle you made, how heavy was it, and what's the difference now? It must be just ridiculous, the weight of the paddles, your lightest carbon fiber paddle now, and the original wooden ones.
Yeah, you know, back then, a really light wooden paddle was like 21, 23 ounces. We ended up getting them down with balsa wood blades, I think at one point 15 to 16 ounces. Our carbon paddles, our heaviest one now is our recreational model, is still lighter than any of the super lightweight wood paddles we've had. Our lightest racing paddle in dragon boating, it's the XL Plus, and that weighs between 10.5 and 11 ounces. The XL's right around 11.5 to 12, and then the standard dragon boat paddle with a green sticker, I'm sure everybody's seen these paddles, that's around 14.5 ounces. And then again, you could get your choice of grips. You know, they're all custom made. If somebody wanted it made in 1/8-inch increments, we could easily do that.
We talked also about this. This has to do with outrigger, and I'm looking at the screen. I see a lot of you have got outriggers or have that experience and use the outrigger paddle. Do you want to talk a little bit about the width of the blade versus the stroke rate? Remember we talked about that the other day?
Yeah, yes, Pat, I do. You know, it took me over 20 years to figure this out, but it really makes sense. As you know, back in the days when I first started paddling, I kept making my blade bigger and bigger and bigger, thinking I was going to go faster with a bigger blade. But you got to keep in mind, the bigger blades are going to create more turbulence in the water when you pull them, so you're losing a little bit of energy. But don't get me wrong, you're getting a lot of water with a big blade. But with the smaller blades, especially you know, the blades we make are really efficient. Most of the pro racers, these are the top pro racers in the world we're talking about, not in dragon boating, but in C2 pro class. They're all using 7.5-inch wide blades. And, you know, between 7.5, 7.75, you know, these guys, they're all using our paddles. And when they order them, you know, we know them personally because we race against them. And we go, man, that's narrow. So we start using them, you know. And it's really deceiving, because when you get in this really tiny blade, it still packs a real punch in the water. And that the advantage over a narrower blade over a wider blade is it won't beat you up like in the type of racing we do, marathon racing. You'll never see anybody using a big blade. Any, you know, 8 inches would be big. But the theory is, you know, it's you still get the really good catch and pull with a narrow blade, and it allows you, you know, when you want to go faster, you just increase your stroke rate, and then, you know, you got your cruising speed. You could lengthen your stroke out and still not have the blade kill you like the big blades we used to use years ago. You know, you got to be a phenomenal athlete to begin with to use one, and a lot of women use these big blades, which, you know, I don't try to talk them out of it, but I'm thinking I give them what they want, and I say, well, are you sure that's what you want? Yeah. So, and they're ordering 9.5 inch blades, where they should be using something like an 8 or 8.5, you know, and an outrigger would be plenty for them. But the stroke rate, you know, we'll run 85 strokes a minute in shallow water. You know, we have all different depths of water. It's not like, you know, the racing you guys do mainly is you're in deep water all the time. We go in all different types of water, you know, from 1 foot, 2 foot, 3, 4 inches, you know, to 10, 20 feet deep type of water. Stan knows all about that. I'm sure he's listening. And but the stroke rate, it's much easier to maintain a high stroke rate with a narrower blade, and it won't tire you out. Actually, if you do try it sometime, it's actually, when you get used to it, running a faster stroke rate, you think it's going to be harder, but it's not. When you, after, you know, you get maybe 10 hours of practice, and your body will adapt over to it. And actually a faster stroke rate's easier than a slower stroke rate. I know in the dragon boating, there's all different types of stroke rates people use. You know, probably mostly faster because the races are so short. So everybody's going probably as fast as they could stroke, you know, to get the speed of the boat.
What about these adjustables? And I hesitate to bring this up because you and I talked about this the other day. People are going to ask about paddle length. What do you recommend? And I'd like to hear personally, is the trend sounds like it's going a little bit downward in terms of length for OC1s than it used to be. The longer paddle is the best. And then maybe a little bit about adjustables. And we talked about this the other day too, that my first experience with adjustables, and it wasn't with one of your paddles, was that they were slipping, and that was like many years ago. And now I've found that adjustable paddles are quite reliable and a good alternative, but maybe a little bit heavier.
Yeah, they do add, I think, 3 ounces to the paddle, but it's all on the top of the paddle, so it's not really that critical. You know, it's, you know, you don't feel as if it would be, you know, if you had a 3 ounces long or heavier blade. But the adjuster Zre has, it's a stainless steel lever lock. There's no tools required to adjust it. You flip a lever, you adjust it. There's a scale on it, and ours adjusts from 0 to 6 inches in adjustment. And ours, we don't have any slippage problem with ours. I mean, if one ever did, it's very simple to fix. On the side of it, there's one screw in the center and 2 little set screws on the side. The side set screw locks the center screw. Some people try to tighten that center screw without loosening little screws, which you cannot do. You got to loosen both little screws, and you'll see that center screw's got like notches around the outside of it, and usually 1 click clockwise is enough, but you want to lock your screws down before you end up locking it back down with a lever. Otherwise it's going to slip and be loose, and then you'll have to adjust it all over. But that's the way you adjust ours. And you could go 1 or 2 clicks, but we do that right here. We make sure they're not going to move here, and we haven't had any complaints about, you know, the adjusters moving. And it's quick and easy. You know, it's just a lever lock. It's aluminum adjuster. It's got a stainless steel lever lock on it, and it's fully adjustable. You know, the tightness of it, which, you know, you shouldn't have to mess with it because they're adjusted here, but, you know, you have 6 inches of adjustment, you know, go back and forth.
And what about paddle length?
Paddle length, Yeah, that's a, you know, that's a tough one because you know, you get a recommended length, but is it correct for you? You know, we'll get a length like say a 48, and you know, it all depends on your technique, on whether that paddle is going to fit you perfectly. And there's several different ways. I know you could Google it, go online. They have some charts there that are very, very accurate on the paddle lengths. Or you could grab a paddle like, you know, the old method there is you spread your arms out like this, and you put the blade in your fingers and curl your fingers over and extend your arms, and your blade should go to your elbow. Now, I tried that with my paddle, and it come out right on. It come right to my elbow. So that, for me, that worked good. But I think most people, you know, going by the chart, it's going to get them close enough. I think they're going to be good with that. And then, you know, the coach could fine tune them. You know, I'm sure everybody's techniques worked on in the dragon boats, and you know, they're well watched with paddle length and technique and so on. So they, you know, you get fine tuned basically by your coach, but just going by the recommended length is probably really, really close.
And what about care of the paddle? I've heard stories, people say if you don't want to leave your paddle in the hot sun. Like you talked about the curing process and curing them at a certain temperature, and how that can help prevent them from deteriorating in the hot sun. Can you talk about that a bit, so we all know how to look after our paddles?
Well, everybody knows how harmful the UV rays are, not only on canoes, but your skin itself. You know, I mean, everybody's got to wear sunblock or something, or you know, you're going to get fried, and your skin will get damaged later on. Same thing holds true for a canoe or a paddle. Best thing to do is not leave them out in the sun. If you could just put them in a shady area, you know, until you race. Once you're using them, I mean, that's fine, because they're out, you know, in the water, staying cool, dipping them in and out of the water. But the UV rays on our paddles I haven't seen it really affect it much, hardly at all. Our paddles are oven cured at over 300 degrees, and we use pre-preg carbon fiber on the shafts, and then we RTM mold the grips and blades. And I believe we're the only company in the world that actually RTM molds a paddle. I haven't seen any out there. And of course, ours are made in the USA, which I'm quite certain that we're the only ones doing that in the United States as well. Everybody else is in Asia. But as far as the paddle goes, I mean, your edging, you don't really need to put, you know, you see a lot of people put tape around the edging. On our paddles, you don't need it. There's a solid carbon fiber edge that goes totally around the outside of the blade. And if you did put a little nick or scratch in it, it's as simple as taking a sanding block or a file, or, you know, sometimes we're on the river and put a nick in it. We'll just take a flat rock and use it as a file and sand it a little bit, which is, but that's all you have out there. But some people actually, believe it or not, take a piece of sandpaper with them in the boat, you know, especially, you know, training purposes. If they connect with a rock and they put a little flat spot in the bottom of the paddle, it's just as simple as just touching it up and you're good to go. You know, a lot of people don't realize that, not so much in the dragon boat paddles, there is an edge around there and you can sand it, but say in our outrigger paddles and all our flat water paddles, there's a solid carbon fiber edge going down the edge, and on the bottom it gets a little wider for sanding purposes mainly. So if you keep that, you know, look at them periodically, and if they look a little flat or ragged, all you have to do is sand them, and basically they get more durable after you sand them. The more you sand them down, the little bit broader the tip gets and the more durable they get. But there's one thing you got to look out for is you don't want to sand through the edge into your foam, but you got a lot of sand in there before you get to that point. But, you know, when you get close to the foam, then you want to be a little cautious on your sanding, but you could see your edge, you know, the thickness of it and how much you're taking off.
Okay, so here's a question that I'm going to ask on behalf of everybody. Somebody hits your blade and you get a hole in a dent in your blade, and it goes right through to the foam. What's the best way to deal with that so you don't have to buy a new one? Can you just drop a little marine epoxy in there, or what's the simple fix there?
Yeah, the only thing you need to do with that is, first of all, get it dry. You know, it's okay, you know, if you hit it in the side where it's not structurally damaged, you know, like most of my CR, very rarely you'll get one that actually going to weaken the paddle. But I know exactly what you mean, these little cuts and bruises on the dragon boat paddles. But the best thing to do is, say if you do it during an event and you notice your paddle's got a little cut in it, the best thing to do is maybe put it, if you have some any kind of tape, you know, not duct tape, but, you know, like Scotch tape or something, just put that over it, or anything, just keep the water from going into the blade. And if it does for a day, it's really not going to hurt it. But what you need to do is, when you get home, is to dry it out. Actually, you know, put it in the sun and let the sun dry it would be the best thing. And then, like you say, you could take any kind of epoxy. You know, you could take some epoxy glue and just dab it in there. And, you know, if you have a hair dryer, just warm it up, and that'll help it suck into the blade, and it will seal it. Another thing you could do is you put it on and put a little piece of wax paper, rigid plastic over it. So when you put your epoxy on, you drop a little piece of that over it, and it'll just flatten it right out. And actually, it'll make it look pretty good. That's how we do most of our repairs here. Now, the real bad ones, we add a little carbon fiber, you know, just fibers in with the epoxy we'll put in there. Sometimes if it's even worse than that, then we might have to take a little piece of carbon cloth and put over it as well. But they're perfectly okay after they're fixed. It's not gonna structurally hurt your paddle unless it's something big and, you know, puts a crack across your paddle or something. But those little cuts and bruises, they should be sealed up. You know, you shouldn't leave them unattended. But, you know, I mean, if you don't want to seal them, just put a piece of tape over them, you know, and just keep the water out of them.
Cool. A lot of our guys just put decals over. If you see a paddle with a lot of decals on it,
yeah,
that means they paddled in front of or behind somebody that's not that great.
Yeah, we do that with canoes here too. When we put a hole in the side, we put a sticker over it. the quick fix.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, you've covered all my questions. Anybody have any questions for Bob? Yeah, Randy?
Hi, Bob. I have two questions. First question is, do you know how many paddles you sold in total since the beginning of your company? The second question, I heard a rumor that if you broke your shaft or you broke the handle, that you can get replacement parts from ZRE. Instead of throwing the paddle out, you can fix it. Is that true?
Absolutely. Our paddles are a three-piece construction. The blade, the shaft, and the grip, and then they're sized and epoxied together. So for instance, the blade's the most expensive part. So if you break a blade, it's still going to be less than half the price probably of buying a whole new paddle. You know, you could replace the blade, and we got some pretty good online instructions that you could do yourself, or you could send it back. We don't charge any labor to replace a blade, a shaft, or a grip. But then again, you know, if you break your shaft, then that could be replaced. Or, you know, a lot of paddles get slammed in cars, doors, and run over, and all kinds of stuff like that happens. And, you know, we could replace the grip, we could replace the shaft, we could replace the blade for a lot less than a newer, you know, buying a whole paddle. And then once we get the paddle in, I mean, we don't just replace the part, we test and look at the whole paddle and test it. And if there's any little spot that needs attention, it gets fixed for next to nothing. Our customer service is great. You know, we're USA based. We make all our components right here. So we don't have to wait for anything. Everything's super lightweight, tested, strong. If anybody's got a problem, we don't even argue with them. We'll either fix the paddle. If we can't fix it and make it look as good as a new one, we'll give them a new one at free of charge.
Wow.
Thanks. And also, how many paddles do you think you sold?
Oh, yes. The paddles. Well, you know, I haven't been keeping track, you know, since we started making them, but we're usually around 2,500 to 3,000 a year. This year we're a little low numbers because of the COVID. You know, all the dragon boat races, as you know, were all canceled. All the canoe races that we do, they're all canceled except for a couple small ones. You know, so, but there's still a lot of people out there paddling, you know, so we're experiencing a lot of new customers this year. You know, probably for that reason, people just want to get out and do something. And there's, you know, nothing better than going out on the water paddling. I mean, through this COVID thing, sitting home, you know, I mean, that kind of eats into you, you know. No worst thing to do is watch the news and have them scare the heck out of you. And the best thing to do is, like, here, everybody, we have more paddlers here now than we normally have when we're racing. People are just out paddling, kayaking, you know, getting on the water. Of course, we see eagles and muskrats and beavers and hawks, owls, blue herrings, you name it, you know, geese. You know, it's just beautiful to be out there and see all this. And at the same time, you're getting exercise, you know, you're cleaning the cobwebs out of your head, and it's just a great thing to do. Everybody should be on the water, whether they're racing or not, but it's just great for overall physical health.
Well said. Any other questions for Bob? Yeah, Peggy?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi,
Okay.
Peggy, how are you?
Thank you very much. I can say I am the proud owner of two ZREs, a palm grip fixed and the adjustable with the T-grip, and I love the paddles. I use my adjustable on my OC because that's all I have, but I'm looking at getting an OC paddle, and you had mentioned the bent. And I've seen several shapes. I can see Pat's in the background where it's got a bend up top, and then I've seen some that have the double bend. Is there a recommendation for a single bend, double bend? And then the second question, I've seen all fiber, and then I've seen hybrids. Is there a recommendation there?
We used to make the double bend. They're good paddles, don't get me wrong, but through all our testing and all the athletes in our areas, they all went back to just standard 12-degree non-double bend paddle, just because it's better balanced. You know, like in the double bend, you're taking away some degrees off the bottom, so it's a little bit tricky. So when you're curving the top back towards you, you got to actually put more bend on the bottom to end up with the degree that you want. So, but through all our testing, you know, just the single bend paddles were faster. And but you know, the double bends are good. You know, like the winning team, if they're all using double bends, everybody's going to buy them because, geez, they won with them. But you know, the same team could take, you know, probably some straight wooden paddles and still win the race. You know.
And the second question was an all fiber versus a hybrid paddle.
All carbon fibers probably better in my opinion. The hybrids are, you know, they're okay, but I was always a believer in all carbon fiber, just for lightweight and strength purposes. Okay. And usually they're, you know, the hybrids are a little bit tougher to repair if you need a repair on them.
Yeah. And one other question, I'm sorry. As far as length, I've been told that to purchase an OC paddle, you need to purchase longer than that you normally use for dragon boating. So I use my adjustable on my OC, and I adjust it up to 50 inches and sometimes upwards of 51. Is there any recommendation on length for the OC?
Are we OC6 or OC1?
One.
Through my experience, everybody's going quite short on the OC1s. So you would use a much short, I think probably what you use in a dragon boat would be around the right length for the OC1. Mainly they're low to the water. So right there, it cuts your paddle length down pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I'm like 5'11". I ended up using a 48 and an OC1 that felt pretty good. Like for instance, in an OC6, I'll use up to 53, 54, depending on what seat I'm sitting in. But the guy in the number 1 seat uses a shorter paddle because he's the pace setter. You know, he needs a shorter paddle to keep the stroke rate up.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Judy?
Hi. So I have one of your Zres. Ta-da!
Yeah, nice.
And, and it was a Christmas present 2 years ago. And the reason why I didn't have an adjustable with a lever was I was a bad girl and I allowed salt water to get stuck. And so my adjustable is permanently stuck at a certain length. And then so that's why I got the standard one without the lever. Can you recommend any way to unstick adjustables if you don't properly wash them off after use and they're stuck?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up. When you're in salt water, you should pull, flip the lever up and pull the whole thing right out and wash it out with fresh water and then drain it, put it back together. The salt water, it'll take a while for it to cake up and start making things not work so good. But, if you send a paddle to us, we only seen a few of them like that, and man, they were stuck, so I couldn't believe it. But what we do is a lot of times we don't even charge for it, but we'll put on a whole new adjuster and send it back to you free of charge.
Well, it was my fault.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you don't think of it really, you're in salt water, but like you look at, if you look at your canoe, anything aluminum in there, you get it in salt water. If you don't wash it off every day or quite often, it's going to, you're going to see it. It's going to start to pet and start looking different, But the adjustable paddle, that adjuster with the lever, that's anodized aluminum. So the inside of that, the salt will cake up in there eventually and lock it up. But we haven't seen it a lot, but we have seen a few of them come through like that.
Yeah.
But
okay,
if you send it to us, I'd be more than happy to fix it for you.
I'm too embarrassed. I'm just going with my
embarrassed.
So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions for Bob? Okay, Bob, and if they want to order a paddle, they just go on the website, contact you. What's the, if they interested in any of your equipment?
They could either call us. Our phone number, emails right on every page of our website. You could go to our store online and pretty much order everything online. I also can offer you guys 10% discount. Everybody on this video, all you got to do is put in today's date, 08/15/20/10, and you'll get a refund for 10%. If that will help any of you guys out.
Oh, that's nice. That's great. Thanks, Bob. And yeah, and at a time when business is tough, and we all recognize that, and counting on you guys to be, Bob, for ZRE to be there when Dragon Boat sort of resurfaces and re-enters the sporting world again. And Yeah, we'll all be better at it.
Yeah, well, the good thing with carbon fiber paddles is, you know, everybody knows they're light and strong, but they're, you know, like the older people, I get a lot of comments on this is, you know, they buy, like some of our paddles are as light as 7.5, 8 ounces, you know, the flat water paddles. And we even have photographers buying our top of the line Power Surge Pro, the lightest, greatest paddle we ever made, and they're photographers, and they want to sneak up on game and not scare it, so they love them. But you look at the older group of people, and that includes myself. You know, you get into a lightweight paddle, and not a lot of people realize this, but if you get a lightweight paddle, it's going to be a lot less work on your body. So if you got a sore elbow, sore shoulder, it's going to help it immensely, you know, lifting you know, a light carbon paddle opposed to a wood paddle or those plastic paddles you see, you know, those aluminum plastic ones that probably weigh nearly 3 pounds. I mean, people that use those, they'll go out and paddle and they won't paddle again because of the paddle. It's the paddle's beating them up. But if you gave them a nice carbon fiber paddle to go out, you send them out on the water, they're going to come back and do it again. So, you know, a lot of people don't even know that, but I'm sure, you know, the racers do, and a fair amount of people out there know that. But, you know, you get a lot of, you know, you still see a lot of people out there, we call them clubs, but it would discourage somebody.
That's great, Bob. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. We have time for another question if anybody has one.
I have a purchase. I'm sorry. I have a grip question on my adjustable. Do you sell just the different grips? Because I really like the palm grip best, and I wanted to put a palm grip on my adjustable.
Yes. What most people are doing is they're buying the adjuster tube with a grip in it, is what you'd have to do. So all you'd have to do, you know, if you had another grip, say if you got a palm grip and you wanted to switch to a T grip and use both of them, you just flip the lever up, pull the whole adjuster tube out, and slide in the new one, and you're good to go.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great. Okay, great to see everybody again. Unless anybody's got any closing comments. Mondrell, you got nothing to say? I can't. I've got to do this. I'm trying to unmute Stan Mahachuk. It's not working. Okay. Anyway, guys, yeah, thanks a lot. Have a great weekend, and thanks for connecting with us again today. It was fun. Bob, great information. Mondrell, thanks for that trip down memory lane. That was a blast, and we'll see you guys. Hopefully, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Bob.